It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life. From the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators. The famous and not so famous. The controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here is Douglas Coleman.
Howdy-o, hey, ha. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. How are you? Jim Cummings is here today. Jim is a writer, director, producer, actor. And in his latest film, Thunder Road, he does all of it. He's the lead actor, he's the writer, he's also the director. The film won the Grand Jury Prize at South by Southwest in 2018. The story is basically a Texas police officer struggles to raise his daughter as a love letter to his late mom. It's kind of a tragic comedy portrait, and it's very funny and it's very sad all at the same time. I highly recommend the movie. I watched it. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Not a lot of time to chit-chat. This is a full show interview, so we will be right back with Jim Cummings.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps, record producer. This is my story about Elton John, working with him in those early years, going back to 1967 at Dick James, all the amazing tours, those first recordings, going through to Rocket Records. And it's an amazing story about his incredible rise to stardom and my part in that. So look forward to taking you on that journey. So here we go. Yeah, and to order this great audio CD, please just email me at stuartepps@talk21.com. That's Stuart, Stuart, Epps, EPPS, at talk, TALK, 21 in figures.com. Stuart Epps at talk21.com. Email me and I'll give you all the details for buying this brilliant audio disc. Thank you. Bye.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of the Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Tired of living in a culture of lies, fake news, and alternative facts? The Pro-Truth Pledge reverses the tide of lies by calling on politicians, and everyone else, to commit to truth-oriented behaviors. The pledge asks signees to commit to 12 behaviors that research in behavioral science shows lead to truthfulness, such as clarifying one's opinions and the facts, citing one's sources, and celebrating people who update their beliefs toward the truth. Private citizens who sign the pledge get the benefit of contributing to a more truth-oriented society. Public figures get more substantive rewards for signing the pledge in the form of positive media and public recognition. The pledge crowdsources the truth by asking volunteers to evaluate the statements of public figures who sign the pledge. Take the pledge, demand that your elected representatives do so, and encourage your friends to take it at protruthpledge.org.
Acclaimed author of Garden, Jane Yates brings you the first book in a new trilogy, Octopus Pirate, a story of a foundling who has unusual talents, such as the ability to communicate with octopuses. As a baby, he was washed up on an island off the Scottish mainland. An eccentric former nun who lives alone with cats brings him up. He joins a circus and narrowly escapes plots against him, flees to Cornwall, builds a replica pirate ship, that's also an airship to travel back in time to fight real pirates. Get your copy today from Amazon, only 99 cents.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! No doubt about it. I gotta get another hat.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Jim Cummings. Hi, Jim. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. I watched your movie earlier today, Thunder Road, and it was pretty funny. It was funny and sort of sad, and it kind of covers all the emotions.
Yeah, that poor guy. Yeah, it's a weird one for sure. I'm glad they let me make it.
Now, before we talk about the film, just give us a little bit of your backstory. You know, where you grew up, what you're doing, why you're making films, and if you've done anything else with your life other than films.
Not much, yeah. Film has kind of consumed me over the last couple of years. I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, a small town called Metairie, on the outskirts of New Orleans, and I spent the first 18 years of my life there, and then the next 4 years in college in Boston at a small art school. And I studied film to write and direct, and then graduated and realized that nobody was going to hire a 21-year-old to write and direct anything. And so I did a bunch of smaller jobs that were on the periphery of film. I learned Photoshop, and I was editing for people, and I was a production assistant at Lucasfilm and Industrial Light and Magic. And then I started producing for friends that had ideas for viral videos and animations, and started a small startup for animation in the North Bay of San Francisco. And I spent 5 years doing that, and also producing feature films for friends of ours and just people that we met through the festival circuit, and was a little dissatisfied from that. Or rather, I was seeing movies that I thought were really great, like Krisha, this film by Trey Edward Schultz, and it was shot in his family's house with members of his family, and it looks and feels like a, you know, P.T. Anderson, Terrence Malick, John Cassavetes style film, and they shot it for nothing, and they shot it for $30,000 or something like that, from friends and family and Kickstarter. And I thought, okay, that's something that made me laugh and cry out loud often throughout the movie. And I was like, I think there's something to this. I think there's like a movement afoot of young people who are taking risks and making stuff in their backyards, literally with their friends and family. And I guess that was the first really independent film that I had seen, despite the fact that I'd seen thousands of quote-unquote independent films. And I was like, all right, well, shit. If they didn't, maybe I'll try it. And so I made the Thunder Road short film, which is just a scene of a police officer delivering a eulogy. And it was the first real thing that I had just been manic about and directed. And we spent 6 hours in a funeral home shooting this thing, and I rehearsed it for 2 months beforehand and got my friends and family to come and to be the people in the pews, and edited it and submitted it to Sundance on a whim. We never dreamed that, you know, I'd never known anybody that got into Sundance. And we did, and we were very lucky, and we won in 2016, which is insane. And then I made 10 more single-take short films over the next year and a half. Nobody would trust me to make anything bigger. I tried to make feature films after Thunder Road, and then just, you know, it petered out, and we couldn't get anybody to take it seriously. And then, after doing these 10 other short films that are pretty decent, we still couldn't get anybody to give us any money to make stuff. And that became frustration and ambition. And I was like, all right, well, screw it. Let's just do it ourselves. Let's put our money where our mouths are. And I shot a few commercials, and I was able to raise a little bit of money. And then my buddy, Zach Parker, who's a film producer, was like, all right, I'll match you, and we'll just, run a Kickstarter campaign. And through Kickstarter, we were able to raise $36,000, which is incredible. We were only asking for $10,000 for the pre-production. We were able to partially finance the movie from the public and loving friends and the internet. and we made this thing, and then the feature got into South by Southwest, another dream. And we shot it in Austin, but still I had never dreamed we'd ever get into any film festival, and it won there. And then now the same thing. I'm just making stuff. I'm in Virginia right now, and I'm writing a movie that we're trying to shoot in February about a werewolf. And wake up every day thinking of how to make more movies and keep my friends employed.
So you mentioned that the eulogy, which is actually the first scene in your film, that was originally just a short film, just that piece?
So I'd been rehearsing it on my car on the drives to work as like a monologue, this like weird, performance piece for an actor. I wasn't an actor at the time. And I was like, oh, this could be a really cool thing to watch this tough guy have a meltdown. And then I just started front loading it with all of the more difficult things to do. There has to be an incredible dance choreography, and there has to be, a song that's like a really famous song. And not only does it have to be funny, it also has to be heartbreaking. And it just became this weird performance art piece that I wanted to do. And at best, I was hoping it would get, staff picked on Vimeo. I feel like that's every young filmmaker's dream, is to have Vimeo say, yeah, you did a good job. And, but still, I had no idea. I had no idea that it was going to be what it became. I knew it was good, but I didn't think it was going to be, as acclaimed as it is, certainly. So it was just this 13-minute long shot of this cop having a mental breakdown in public. And it came out in early 2016, when the Black Lives Matter movement was at its peak, and you couldn't get onto Facebook without somebody talking about the police. And I just knew that it was going to be this kind of wedge subject that if it had been a Marine, it might not have been so poignant or so newsworthy or eye-catching. And it just clicked with the public.
Okay, so did you write the film after that, or did you have the full film, the full story of him? Or was that sort of the inspiration? Was that the step and then the next step? Yeah?
Yeah, so we shot the short film with only the dream of making a short film. I had written other feature films, but nothing about this guy. It was just an idea. And then for a year, I was telling myself and my team that we couldn't turn Thunder Road into a feature, that's like the most interesting moments of that guy's life, and it would have to be the climax of any feature film. And just the formula of making the movie, I couldn't figure out how to make it work. And I was like, the whole lead up to that scene, the climax of the funeral, would have to be him having a bad relationship with his mom, and like it would just be this tragedy, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. And then I was thinking about putting it as the opening scene. I was watching a short film. I hadn't seen it in about a year. This is like late 2017, maybe early 2017. And I was like, what if the opening scene is just the funeral, and his daughter pulls away from him at the end? Then that could be the inciting incident of the hero's journey. And if that's the beginning of the movie, then the rest of the movie would have to be about this guy trying to get his daughter to like him again and to kind of repair the legacy of the family. And as soon as I had that idea, I was like, oh, and then we get to do this. It gets to be this like Mike Judge style comedy about family in the South. And then also this like heartbreaking Pixar movie showing this guy going through hell. And I was like, this is a functioning movie. And I spent the next 5 days in my friend's basement writing a first draft. And by the end of it, I had like 70 pages of the movie written.
So how long did it take? Okay, 5 days you had a first draft. How long did it take to get where you were like, okay, this is it?
Yeah. Well, very luckily, I have a wonderful team of people who are filmmakers in their own right. So like my good friend Danny Madden, I started out working for him as a producer, and he was directing, and now he does a lot of the creative direction on my films and also the sound design, and it's just an incredible support system. So, and Zach Parker, the same thing, where, you know, he was in development for years, and so he knows how to break story. So literally I had the 70-page draft and sent it to those two and Tony Ascenda and just the brain trust of my friend group, really. And they all had good insight, and we shifted it and made it what it was over probably a month and a half, maybe 2 months after that. And at that time, we were still trying to get, the film world to finance it. We're still knocking on doors, hoping that somebody would take us seriously. And it never happened. And it got to a point where it happened over a long period of time. And then all at once, it was like, oh no, we're the people who have to support the film. Like, we're the ones who care the most about it. We don't have to worry about getting somebody else to care about it. We have to do it. And so we started building out a Kickstarter page. But I would say, all in all, to get it to where it is now, I mean, it's always changing. It's like, even in the editing room, you end up pulling out dialogue that just doesn't work inside of the moment, or you feel the audience's attention span waning. I feel like to get it to where it is now, David Gordon Green says that. He says, he has an interview about Snow Angels, and he says Snow Angels was a book first, and then it was a screenplay, and then that's like a phoenix dying and being reborn. And he goes, and then you shoot it. There's a lot of improv in his movie. So that's like a phoenix dying and then being reborn. And he goes, then you get in the editing room, and then it's a completely different thing too. So it's like the storytelling never stops. It's just pivoting slightly. So I would say it took overall the screenplay probably 4 or 5 months to get to a shooting draft. And then you're always building the plane while you're flying it on set. So, there's always small changes.
Well, I was just thinking, if you would put the funeral scene at the end, it would have completely changed the whole composition of the film, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know if it would have been a very good movie. And we talked about that a lot. Like 8 Mile is a great film about a guy struggling with his, mom. Right. And I was like, well, we're not going to beat 8 Mile. Like 8 Mile is a great movie. Like we're just going to do that again. And then, I don't know, I love movies and I love short stories that, what's the expression? They say, come in late and leave early, where it's like, you don't need to have a relationship with his mom for the audience to feel for the guy losing his mom. You don't even have to have her alive in any scene in the movie. Right. You just have this guy talk about her and what she meant to him, and that's enough. And it was moving me. Like I do all of my screenplays as podcasts. I'll record them, doing one tomorrow for the werewolf movie in a tiny closet. I'm recording it just like this as you're hearing my voice, and it's me doing all the parts of the movie. And if it's working out loud, it's usually a good test as to if it's going to work in a feature film. Like you get a good idea of the cadence of performance and language in a way that you can't in the written word. And so yeah, I mean, it was working for me when I was recording it as a podcast. It was making me laugh and cry, and I thought, okay, cool, this is good enough.
I think you were smart to do it that way because, like you said, you don't have to have the focus on... It would have taken the focus away from you if you had the mother still alive and she dies at the end. Where this way, okay, she's dead, that's the starter, and now the whole focus is on you and how you sort of disintegrate somewhat through the film, and then at the end it resolves somewhat,
I also think there's something to keeping that opaque of if you got to know the mom in the scenes, you would have judgments about her, and right. You would it would be that specific mom who passed away. And if you don't have that, it is every mom that passes away. Right, anyone's mom. An audience comes to that with the main character of a son who's going through loss, and that is, I feel like, more of a human story. And I feel like, if we had scenes with the mom, even if it was old footage of her, it would taint the experience of. It doesn't matter. It's like just the film is more about. This guy going through this thing, and you see a mirror. It's you when you're watching this guy go through this thing, and you would lose that effect if we introduced the mom.
Well, absolutely. And also it leaves the audience with the challenge of sort of trying to figure out what kind of a relationship he had with his mom, where if you spelled it out for everybody, there would be no challenge. So you're thinking, was this a good relationship? Was it a bad relationship? Because obviously the guy is breaking down, and you begin to wonder if the mom was a saint or a devil or something in between, or you know what I mean? It leaves you with more sort of things to reckon with in your brain.
Yeah, and I find that so interesting. Like short stories I mean, I love short stories, especially Hemingway short stories. You're reading his work or Faulkner, and you're just thrown into it, and then you become a detective. Like the actual act of reading a short story is forcing the audience to figure out what's going on, and it's far more fulfilling, and it's trickier. It's like you see these turns of phrase that are used, and it leads to these clues that then you get a picture of the backstory. There's one line in Thunder Road that I love. It's like one of the quickest pivots between comedy and drama. I say, the first time I'm talking to Nate, and I say, if you see me wrestle an alligator, help the alligator. And he laughs, and I go, yeah, you like that one? That's an old one of my dad's, apparently. He used to say that all the time. And just putting in the word apparently there says, I never knew the guy. Right. I heard that secondhand. And that becomes the only clue that we really have about Jim's father and what that relationship was like. But using one word pointedly in the middle of that sentence says a world. And you don't have to have anything else. The audience gets it.
Well, you brought up an interesting point about books versus movies. You mentioned Hemingway. Is that a lot of movies, not all, certainly not yours, but a lot of, especially, I would say, the major studio stuff that's been coming out as of late, doesn't leave any room for the audience to interpret. It just pretty much shows you exactly what they want you to see, and you go home feeling entertained or not. A book, especially one that's written well, and since you used Hemingway, like you said, they throw you in the middle of the scene, and then it's up to you to kind of figure out what's going on. And you can go different ways depending on your interpretation of their language that they use. So to do that in a film, it takes a certain style, and it takes a certain talent to be aware of that, rather than just, okay, here's a scene, we're just going to copy it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think there's also, I kind of came into filmmaking during this time where mediocrity was king, or like they don't.
I'm not sure it's changed, but go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, like right now, like I feel like right now that's happening. Where like, looking at most films, they never use the camera to help to tell the story. It's like we do that all the time, and nowadays it's just capture the footage. They said the line, okay, we're moving on, and it's like very simple coverage, and they don't use the camera. There's no cinema at the cinema these days. It's terrible.
And if you need something, throw in a CGI effect, and you're done. You know.
Yeah, and that's it. Like craft is not going to change, and I feel like that's something that I always tell everybody: is study craft. Like look up cinematic craft or like storytelling craft, because that's everything. It's like I talk about jokes a lot, of setup and payoff, and like punchlines, emotional or comedic, and that is a formula, or that is an equation that functions well inside of the human brain, and that's not going to change, but it just happens to be absent from most cinema these days. And so I feel like I came into the film market at a time when people were appreciating these mediocre, lame, tame, PG-13 Captain America, horseshit movies. Yeah. And now, with independent film being as free and as cheap to produce as it is, you can eat their lunch. You can win their audience if you can make something realistic or depict humanity or have more craft than they do. And that's why these independent filmmakers are rising in the ranks to take on giant studio productions, because they're the only people they're the only show in town. It's like they're making better stuff than the stuff that you can see on TV.
Well, that could be the second half of this interview, because then becomes the challenge of distribution. And where it's the double-edged sword, technology has enabled someone like you to make the film without having to spend millions of dollars to do it, where that would not have been possible back in the days when you had to shoot on 35 millimeter.
Yep.
But now there's so much of it out there that how do you get your film to the top of the heap so that you can start reaping some reward for it. I mean, that's the big challenging now.
Yeah. I remember hearing Ted Hope say that at South by Southwest one year. He said the best thing about making movies nowadays is that everybody can make them, and the worst part about making movies nowadays is that everybody can make them.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think that's great. It's democratic. You know, the democratization of feature filmmaking and feature film distribution is great. But like I said before, craft is the most interesting thing. You're not going to win an audience just by making a movie. You have to make it good, and you kind of have to know what you're doing. It's like any other fine art or any other, like at NASA, anybody can build a rocket if they want to. It doesn't mean it's going to make it to Mars. Like you have to be the technician. You have to understand how the brains of the audience are going to interpret the data and if they're going to be entertained by it, and their patience and their attention spans. So yeah, I don't know. I really have thoroughly enjoyed self-distributing Fun Road. We had 0 offers. We won a couple of really big film festivals. We went to Cannes Film Festival. We have a distributor in France, but we couldn't get a distributor in really almost any English-speaking country until we did it ourselves. So we released the film in America through an aggregator called Quiver, which is a platform where you upload your film and you upload the poster and stuff like that. It takes an hour to build out the page, and you upload it in 1080p, and you select a few platforms that you want it on, like iTunes or Google Play or Comcast or DirecTV. You can pitch it to Netflix. You can pitch it to all these other platforms for the cost of about $2,500. It's a phenomenal thing, and really any smaller distribution company is going to do that anyway, except they're going to charge you an arm and a leg, and you'll never see a single dime from your movie. So I'm thrilled that you can make movies by yourself and you can distribute them by yourself, because if you couldn't do that now, I would be living below the poverty line.
Well, exactly. And like you said, the only drawback to it is that the idea of getting signed, let's use musicians as an example, but it's the same idea. In the old days, they used to get signed to a record label, they'd get a nice advance that they had to recoup to the record company, but you got the money. Now, nobody wants to put the money up front, it seems, for the films. You've got to make the film on your own, get the money up yourself, and even distribution. I've seen places that want you to pay, right? Like you said, you had to pay $2,500 to get on their platform, which is fine, but it's kind of you really got to have the money in your pocket to start out, unless you get really lucky and get somebody. Or
you plan for that. We were very lucky in that we had Sundance. We applied for the Creative Distribution Fellowship, and we were awarded it. We won South by Southwest. The short film had won at Sundance, and we said, why don't we do it ourselves? Why don't we self-distribute? We'll work with Sundance's team, and we'll put the film out ourselves. And they gave us, Redford and his team gave us $33,000, along with 2 other films that received $33,000 of their own, to then market their movie and get it onto different platforms.
Well,
and so it's incredible. We're the luckiest people in the world. And we learned so much, and we also got so much data from that experience that now we're going to be able to distribute every other feature film the same way for the rest of our lives. So we basically went from being a production company to a studio. Like, you go to a studio or a distributor because distribution was the chestnut that had yet to be cracked by independent film. But now it's all democratized, and I can get onto any platform that anybody else can. And by making a few phone calls or by pressing a few buttons, I think that the future of the film industry is going to be exactly what we saw with the music industry, where you have these rappers who become famous by posting music videos of their work to YouTube, and then they don't need a label. And actually, signing to a label nowadays means that you won't make any money. Being signed is a negative thing, not a positive thing anymore. And it's the same thing with film. what you're doing is, unless it's, you know, a multi-million-dollar deal, you're giving up your rights in perpetuity in every territory for the rest of your life. And instead, you can just post it online yourself. You can use an aggregator like Quiver. I see it as a no-brainer. It's like, it would be like uploading a video to YouTube and then a bunch of people saying, actually, you have to go through us to upload to YouTube. And you're like, well, no, I can create my own page and upload it myself. That's the future of feature film distribution, I think.
Well, do you think that the major studios and the record labels, since we're talking on that, they still have the advantage when it comes to distribution, though? They still have power over the...
They still have the money.
The little guy.
I mean, they still have the money. So like they spend millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to get people to see their mediocre movies. And that's the thing that gets people to see them, or that's what gets them to be part of the public conversation. Like, they use the same outlets that I use. We used Facebook ads and Instagram to get people to watch our film, but we had, you know, a third of $100,000 to do that. They spend millions and millions of dollars doing that. Like, there is no difference. It's just that they have the money. And I think all that's going to fail. I think all that's going to collapse. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas got together and spoke at an event in 2012 about the major studios and how all it's going to take is 4 or 5 flops because of the budget and the marketing dollars that are spent on these movies. Have 4 or 5 flops for then an entire studio to collapse,
to bankrupt them,
and to bankrupt them. And that was eyebrow raising for me. And I listened to that. It hit me hard. And I realized that, like, it's going to be a level playing field soon, or it's going to be a monopoly, and then you're going to have people that are making stuff that's unsanitized that the audiences will go to instead of these big PG movies.
Well, if you figure, you know, 200 million plus for one of those films, then the math is about right. I mean, 4 or 5 flops at 200 million apiece is $1 billion. And
yeah,
I think that would take pretty much anybody down. If you lose $1 billion.
Yeah, the budget of Captain America 2, I want to say, was $179 million, but it recouped $750 million in the first 4 years or something like that. Maybe global box office. So yeah, and then they own it, so they're able to license it forever and package it and have the 25th anniversary box set and that stuff. But we can do that too. Yeah, I think that is non-overlapping areas of expertise. I think those are their own kinds of movies, and if you can make something that actually affects people and showcases humanity and surprises people, like Chaplin did, I think you'll win in the end.
Well, I hope so, because otherwise it's a pretty grim statement on the condition of our society. If people just want a bunch of lights and whistles and don't want anything that's going to make them think. You know, nobody's going to Captain America and crying at the end of the film.
Yeah. Well, I hate to say it, but that's not often true. Captain America, no, but people talk about Infinity War like it was Schindler's List, and it's this. They talk about this movie, the new Avengers film, because there's like some scenes in it where people die. And it's shocking to them that they felt anything in the movie theater, and that's a sign to me. It's like, if that's what people are looking for, they're looking to tell people that they cried at the cinema and that it was that they saw some version of humanity on the screen, and we can do that far better than any of these people. Like, we can use real cursing, and we can use real violence, and we can use real sex and real humanity in a way that Mickey Mouse can't. You know, like Mickey Mouse, you're not allowed to do that stuff there. And I just think that, like, really we can do that. That's the cheap stuff. That's the stuff that you can do without special effects and move people.
Well, for me, and this is just my own opinion, but I think it's shared by a lot of people, I like films that tell a good story, that has good character development, and that has a character that I can relate to on some level, like, oh, I did that, or oh, I've been in that situation before. And, that just doesn't happen with Star Wars or Captain America or James Bond. I mean, granted, those films are fantasy films, but those are the ones that are making the big money. And
I think you can do both, man. Like I watched Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade, the other day, and it's a fantasy, it's an adventure film, but just watching Harrison Ford hang off the side of a tank and get his fingers stomped on while this wall of dirt is coming at him, and he's stuck on this thing, and he has to get up and fight the Nazis. It inspires such a real fight inside of the audience of like, get him, Indy. And like, I found myself being a child again watching this thing because of the craftsmanship of that film. That film was made 50 years ago, 40 years ago.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. That film is a fairly old film. So
I feel the same thing with The Matrix.
Yeah.
The Matrix, I feel that way. It's a fantasy. It's crazy. But like, I mean, the scene of Neo being dropped from the helicopter and then saving Trinity and him becoming the one, it's in the music and the sound design, it's unbelievable. And that's craftsmanship. The reason you like that is because somebody did a lot of heavy thinking beforehand and thought, this is how we're going to move the audience instead of this is how we're going to sell toys.
I mean, I just think I'm seeing less and less of it
sure.
with the major studios, but I'm seeing more and more of it with the indie guys. And
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, like when you're making Aladdin or you're making a princess movie like Tangled or whatever, you can sell tickets for $14 at the cinema. You can sell them a Blu-ray for $15, or you can sell princess dresses for $65. Like, what do you think they're going to focus on? They're going to focus on getting as many products in there as possible. There's a scene in Star Wars in the episode 7 where they wheel out Harrison Ford, right before they kill him, and he's with Chewbacca, and there's this fight scene, and he reaches for his crossbow blaster, and he says, "Give me that," and he takes the crossbow blaster, and he fires it, and he kills some stormtroopers, and he looks at Chewbacca and says, "I like this," like talking about the blaster. They've been working together, Chewbacca and Han Solo, for 40 years. He's never used that thing before. That is literally, the toy company and Disney putting words into a beloved character's mouth to sell these toys 10 minutes before they kill off one of the best characters on the silver screen. They do not care about audiences. They care about merchandising. It's terrible.
Well, unfortunately, that's true. Let's go back to your film for a second, because I want to delve into the character that you played just a little bit. Was any of that guy, because I could relate to that guy, I mean, in pieces of him. And I think a lot of people can, where it just, life is falling apart and everything is going wrong. And you say the wrong things at the wrong time, specifically when he goes before the judge.
Yeah. And
everything's going fine. And then his tongue slips. And I forget exactly the line, but the judge looked at him and was like, "What?" And he realizes right then he just put his foot in his mouth. And I think we've all done that in some way or another. While you were writing this, was there any of you in him, or was this a totally fictitious guy? Was there any kind of...
I don't know. I love my mom a lot. I love my mom a whole lot, and that's very realistic. But I say that, I mean, I don't have any children. I don't have a daughter. Both my parents are still alive. I'm a divorcee, and that's probably the closest that I get to the guy. I'm from the South. I'm from New Orleans. But for the most part, no. I mean, really, I see this character as this like empathy machine. I see that dude as this like much more pathetic version of my life, of like the ghost of Christmas future, what could have happened to Jim, to me. And I don't know, I find him just clumsy and funny, and I think that's the thing that's relatable. Like Chaplin's the tramp character is very similar. He's beloved because we've all been there. We've all fallen down a flight of stairs, or you feel bad for the guy. They say comedy is tragedy that happens to somebody else.
True.
I don't know. There's not a whole lot of me in that guy, apart from his love for humanity and wanting everything to be okay with the younger generation.
Well, because you were the writer for this film as well as the lead actor, so I was just wondering if you drew anything from your own personal life on that, or he was just a complete figment of your imagination, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when I first started, so when I was writing the short film, it started out as me thinking of, if my mom passed away, what would I do? And I was thinking, like, I was 28 at the time. I was, 28. And I was thinking about that, and I realized, like, in this car ride driving back from this work event, that I would sing Thunder Road, and it was on the radio, and I just cried uncontrollably for about 4 hours, and I didn't know why. And I was like, I knew that song growing up. It's one of my mom's favorite songs, and she would always talk about it as this like beautiful poem that got her to change her life. All the stuff I talk about in the eulogy. And I was like, man, this is such a powerful thing. It's making me cry. And then I was like, well, what if I screwed up? What if I sang the song and I was terrible and I had a meltdown? Like, that would also be very funny. And I'm a big fan of Pixar movies, and like movies like Inside Out. And that's what you do. You laugh and you cry throughout. And then by the end, you're spent. And it's like, good God, humanity, isn't it? It's so big. And so I was like, okay, well, that could be that. And so really, in the writing process, it's me standing up and acting it out. And I just act it out 1,000 times and write down the best improv and make it as good as I possibly can. But yeah, the whole time I'm thinking about that, about where the audience is going to be on the roller coaster, and how to pivot back and forth between comedy and drama as tastefully and reasonably as possible.
Well, there were definitely moments where it went from the sublime to the ridiculous in a split second. And ridiculous in a good way, in a funny way. Yeah. I don't want to spoil everything, but this particular movie, there isn't like a huge surprise climatic ending or anything that we don't want to do the spoiler alert. So I'll just say that it was the scene where he has to go in and talk to his daughter's teacher.
His wife. Oh, yeah,
the teacher. And when the teacher says, well, she's been using graphic language, and and that whole description, I won't repeat it here, but you know what I'm talking about.
I'll repeat it. Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, what's so funny about that is what's exactly happening right now. You and I are both laughing about dancing around certain curse words, and it's so much funnier than saying the curse words often. Yeah. It's like having to describe it, in a setting that is professional is so funny to me, because it breaks the social boundaries of like, okay, you can't say this certain phrase, so I'm going to have to describe it to you. And that's so much worse than just saying the word. And I think that's so funny. Like, and then to watch two grown men struggle to talk about that, sexual slang in a fourth grade classroom is just hilarious. And then that's at the end of the scene. It's like, and then you realize he was brought in to talk about that, and that they both knew what they were there for, and they were just dancing around it the whole time. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, that was great. I was rolling on that
one. Good.
The other one was the Thunder Road reference. Now, I don't suppose you thought to use the actual song, right? Because you never did in like the machine.
We did in the short film. In the short film, we used the song.
Oh, okay.
And it cuts off halfway through. My daughter is crying, and I have to go over and stop it. And somebody goes over and unplugs the little boombox. And so we shot it both ways for the feature. We shot it 18 times, and the first 9 times we shot it with the song playing, like it does in the short film. And then the second 9 times we shot it without the song, with the alternate eulogy. But with the short film, we submitted it to Sundance without the rights. I didn't know, we don't know the guy. I just submitted the movie, and we got in. And then I was like, oh shit, we might not be able to put this thing online because of all the notoriety around it. And then we won, and I was like, now we're really never going to be able to put this thing online. And so it took about 4 months just to get in touch with the team. Bruce Springsteen does everything by himself. He's just like me. He doesn't have a label to go through anybody. You have to write a check to Bruce Springsteen.
Wow.
And he and his team were incredibly lovely when they didn't have to be. And we sent them the movie. They watched it, and he let us put it online because he's a saint. We are deeply indebted to him and his team. But then with the feature, we didn't want to bother him again. and at the end of the day, when we were editing it, the last take was better. The last take was just perfect. It was like everything went right, and the performance was better, the camera work was better, the sound was better. It was like everything about it was just, it made it the best take. And so very quickly we thought, well, this is going to be the Thunder Road movie without the Thunder Road song in it. And we were all like, that's okay. And since, we've had people say very lovely things. I was in New York screening the movie, and this woman who runs Quad Cinema there is walking out, and she said, I was worried you weren't going to have the song in the feature. And I said, yeah, we don't have the song in the feature. And she said, yeah, you do. And walked away. And that was the entire conversation. But it was the loveliest review we've ever had of, like, the song is still there despite the fact that it doesn't play on the boombox.
Well, actually, having it not play was kind of added to the pathetic whole scene.
It's a nosedive. It's horrible.
Yeah,
the poor guy. Yeah.
He can't even get the music to play out of the boombox. I mean, it added to it, I thought,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, and the other thing about that, I'm so happy to hear that Bruce just let you use this song, because I've talked to other people who have done. I interview a lot of musicians on this show, and people who have tried to do covers of different kinds of things, and a sync license for a very famous song from a very famous person can be a lot of money. And I know that
prohibitively so. Yeah.
Well, for example, the most expensive ones are Beatles songs, and those run like $250,000 if they let you do it. They have to approve. I'm sure if somebody came and wanted to use a Beatles song for a diaper commercial or something, they just say no.
Ken Burns talked about that for the Vietnam War. He was making that movie. It took him 12 years to make. He and his partner, and they're making this Vietnam documentary, cover the entire war. And he said, I would love to have music from the period. That'd be great to have, like, these famous songs. I guess they reached out, they spoke to people, everybody they interviewed on the American side and the Vietnamese side. They said, give us a playlist of the music that you love there. And it was all the same music. The lists compared almost entirely. Like, it was always Beatles and Bob Dylan. And so when they reached out to Apple Records and Bob Dylan's people, everybody was like, no, Ken's making something? Yeah, do it. Of course. Yeah, of course you have the rights. And they didn't have to pay very much because Ken Burns is doing it, and they trust Ken, and he's going to make something good that's worthwhile, that's timeless. And I think that's the same thing at the end of our movie, the feature. We reached out to Bon Iver, Justin, and I was reaching out to him through Twitter and Instagram, and couldn't get in touch with the guy. But then we reached out to his label. And he was lovely, and it's one of my favorite songs, and it makes the ending of the movie so big. And they were like, "Yeah, if you're treating the songs with respect, you could use them." Yeah, it's funny. They always say it's difficult and it's expensive to get this stuff, but if you can just connect to the actual artist on a human level, most of the time these are people who slept on couches too. They've stressed out about their work. They've been sleeping out of cars and making stuff. Bruce especially. So they get it. If you can just get in touch with the artist and talk to them about what you're trying to do, a lot of times they're responsive.
I think you're in a good position when you're making an indie film, especially if they happen to like the film. The people that run into trouble are like, the corporations that want to use their songs just to make money, and, they don't necessarily want to promote the product, whatever it is. I mean, Led Zeppelin, just as an example, agreed to let General Motors use one of their songs because they like Cadillacs, and it was for a Cadillac commercial.
Really?
Yeah.
How funny. How funny. Yeah, see, that's great. It's just, relating to, and the people who pull the trigger on that stuff, it's always the artist. It's like, and sometimes that's just the nature of the music industry. It's like, if you're not touring, licensing is the only way that you'll make a paycheck. So yeah, I mean, if Google just paid for this giant Macaulay Culkin Home Alone thing, and they must have spent millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars because they're Google and they can do it. And and it's cool and it's funny.
Okay, I got to ask the sort of obvious question. Actor, writer, director, which one do you prefer?
I like all three of them at the same time. It's bad, dude. I don't think I'm very good at any of them individually. I'm a good director. I have a good idea of an audience's patience for things. And that's very important for directors to not make stuff that's boring. But I think I'm best at doing all three at the same time, because when I write, I do it out loud. And so it sounds good coming out of my vocal cords, and sometimes it doesn't coming out of others. So I like, Lena Dunham does it, Chris Lilly does it, Steve Coogan does it. I like following in those footsteps. Chaplin did it. I feel like there's this weird, anomaly of people who are just only good at one thing, and it happens to be those three.
Well, so when you write, do you write a character that you thinking, okay, I can do this? Like, your styles or I don't want to use the word limitation, but what you're capable of doing as an actor, and you say, okay, let me write this. And then, whereas if you're writing for not necessarily you could write it however you wanted, and then you'd go out and try to find somebody who you think could capture that character. Yeah,
it's exactly that. So it's like we're and I guess that's it. When you're talking to somebody who you think is an actor who's talented, I think that's probably us seeing part of ourselves in them, or like relatability. So yeah, when I write, so for the 10 single take short films, I only act in 2 of them, maybe 3 of them, and the rest of them are all spearheaded by these incredible actors that we were lucky enough to work with. And really, we just let them go wild. But in the casting process, it's someone who is able to mimic the amount of stress and the amount of spinning plates, that like to functionally juggle as many spinning plates as possible. I always love that. Like, that is dynamism on the screen. That is like conflict and very interesting and comedic and dramatic to me. And so like we were lucky in that we had done the Thunder Road short film first, because any actor who we brought on, we're like, hey, watch this thing. This is your competition. And then they took it seriously. Like, all right, shit, now, man, I got to be better than that. And some of them did. So yeah, I don't know. I think when I'm writing, I just write stress first. I never write characters first. It's just how I would handle a situation. And then the character stuff comes later. The character stuff is like turns of phrase and idioms and character traits and mannerism that then add, dimensionality to each of the characters.
Okay, so I'm just going to note this as a review, that you said all three. You like to do all three at the same time. Quick thing about writing. I mean, I've done some rough draft ideas of screenplays and things, and it's still just stuff on my computer. But the one thing I haven't been able to do yet is to write a character that I would consider playing. It's always somebody else, and I always have somebody else in mind. It's like, oh, this would be perfect for this guy, or this would be perfect for this woman, or whatever. But I never put myself in there, even though I studied acting. So it's kind of strange, because I don't know that I could do that. Not to say I wouldn't try, but I've never thought about writing a part for myself. I would feel easier if somebody handed me a script and say, here, I want you to play this guy. Oh, okay.
Right.
Right. I don't know. That's just me, but
that's interesting. So when you're writing, do you hear the voices in your head or the possible dialogue in your head and then write it down in screenplay format? Like, because that's what most writers do, where it's like they imagine the things in their mind and then they write down that dialogue. Is that how you do it? Like I feel like when most people are writing, they're seeing it as an animation first. So they're seeing it like it's an animated film, and they have these depictions in their mind of what the characters are looking like, and then their voice is coming out of that person's mouth because it's imaginary. Is that how it works for you?
When I write something like that, I usually have a concept of like a real quick story. And then in my mind, I can storyboard. I can actually see, okay, this scene transitioned to this, to this, to this. I can see all of that. And then it's a process of filling in. Well, what are they going to talk about in this block? What are they going to talk about in this block? Maybe this block there will be no dialogue. It'll just be music. It'll just be, what's the term, film term? B-roll?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, so, but where I start is just, I want to tell a story about this guy or this, whatever. And it's a story. And most of the one, I've only done 3. I've got like 3 half finished ones now. But every single one of them is about one main character. And the way that I like to do it are these start from birth to death type films, because I just am partial to those. Like you mentioned Chaplin, the one that Robert Downey Jr., it was his whole story. I love films like that, particularly period pieces where they go back 100 years. So 2 of the 3 that I've written take place during, the Edwardian period, and start there and then work up to 1970 or so, which obviously would take a large budget to do. I don't think I could do it on a, $20,000 or $30,000 indie budget unless everything was CGI. But then CGI is not awfully cheap either, is it?
It will be.
It will be someday.
I would not be surprised. I really feel like there's going to be a future quicker than we can imagine, where you'll be able to animate characters off of your webcam, like on your laptop, where like your face can move and you can act out each scene, and then apply that to a 3D character and build out a space. Like, if I wanted to, you could probably do that now, but it's just going to be so much easier to do that in 10 years. And I think that, then when the barrier of entry is just having a laptop, anybody will be able to tell a story, and craft is all that's going to matter. So I think CGI is difficult now, is expensive now, but I mean, look at what CGI used to be 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and now you can do that on a laptop or your cell phone.
Well, true enough. The one that comes to mind is, did you see that one called Polar Express?
I did, yeah.
That
Robert
was great.
Zemeckis.
Yeah.
It's a great one.
And, it's almost real. That boy, when you looked at his face, at his eyes, it's damn close, It really is.
Yeah.
And I think, in a few more years, 10, 15 years, you won't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah. I mean, even Avatar, the new Avatar movies are coming out, and they're doing some crazy stuff.
Pretty amazing stuff. Jim, we got to wrap this up. We just blew through the whole hour. And I'm going to have to cancel Ben, unfortunately, because you and I just talked on, and Ben was going to come on in like 5 minutes, but I've got no more time for the show. So we've just covered the whole thing. So I hope he won't be too upset. But I think we've covered it. The movie is called Thunder Road. It stars Jim Cummings, and it is available now, yes?
Yes, on iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play.
And please check it out, because it's a very funny and sad and pathetic and poignant and all of those things wrapped into one package, and it's a good story. Jim, thank you so much for coming on. This was
thank you for having me.
Most enjoyable conversation. Best of luck with all the stuff you're doing. And
likewise. What
are you working on now? Well, you got a new one in the works?
I'm gonna walk into this little cabin I'm looking at right now through the window, and I'm gonna record a podcast of the werewolf film that we're making this February. So I'm about to do a lot of voice acting, and it should be fun.
Super. All right, man. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guest, Jim Cummings. Thank you, Jim. This is Douglas Coleman saying, I'll see you when I see you. To the mile, got to run, not fall.
sun.